Bobbi Althoff, a new face on the internet, and for the most part, people dislike her, with the most basic reason being that she is an industry plant. But there is way more to this story than you could ever imagine.
Am I your type?
I'd do it.
Thank you.
You see, when you take a step back, there's actually 5 main reasons that people have grown to dislike Bobbi Althoff in her seemingly instant blow up into the scene. These each become more and more evident for why the hate is so strong. But the first is the fact that she isn't exactly in the situation that she claims to be in. After having Drake, Yachty, Mark Cuban, and even Tyga on a podcast, you can't exactly claim that you're struggling. But that's exactly what Bobbi would continue to do on multiple occasions, growing the hate for her to be even stronger.
Are you making a lot of money yet?
I haven't actually seen any of the money. I'm waiting on like TikTok to give me any money right now because like people think I'm joking about being in debt. I'm not. Like I put every penny I had into this podcast. Like even to come here, I just spent like $2,000. Like
Bobbi actually does have 2 children, both under the age of 4 years old, and stuff with them gets pretty weird later on. But back to this first point, she claims to be poor, in debt, and struggling to make it in this world.
I just think that you should give me $20,000.
I mean, I could.
I know you could.
People quickly found out that she was in fact married, and to a wealthy man at that. Her husband is a guy called Bobbi Althoff, and he has a net worth of roughly $1 million, which is by no means the way that she portrays her life to be. He's a successful author and programmer, but people are speculating that they may have actually gone through a divorce. This would make the story of why she started the Really Good podcast now. I mean, why would it not be 6 months ago or even a year ago? This may have been acting as her last shot at giving her kids a good childhood experience. If Corey left them abandoned like people are guessing, then her story would make a lot more sense. But there's still tons of pieces missing, and if it was all this wholesome, then why would anyone have an issue with her at all? So that you can understand everything else, we have to go to the most simple point that people love throwing around, the fact that she's an industry plant. Twitter user 98 the other day tweeted out about just this, saying Bobbi Althoff is of Jewish descent and is signed to the same management as Drake. This clears up for a lot of people how she could land such a crazy interview at the starting stages of a podcast, which, if you didn't know, would go on to actually be deleted after amassing over 10 million views in less than a month. We'll get into that more in depth later on though, because 98 also noted her agent. He's a guy by the name of TJ Bernardy. TJ Bernardy hides himself fairly well from the public eye, but is one of the craziest agents you could ever be connected to. He works closely with WME, who has some of the biggest celebrities signed in the world. People like Christian Bale, Matt Damon, Jake Gyllenhaal, and you guessed it, Drizzy Drake himself. People have claimed that she signed with WME after the Drake interview, but this logic just doesn't make too much sense. How could she have contacted Drake in the first place then? DJ Academics even spoke on this, calling out Bobbi that there's not a shot in the world she got a podcast with Drake just from a simple DM. I mean, one of the most famous people on the planet is surely not checking their DMs on Instagram for a random TikToker's podcast. Something wasn't adding up, and there was something that went on behind the scenes, no doubt. This something is believed to loop us back to point number 1, being her family. But surprisingly enough, we aren't actually talking about her husband. This actually ties to Bobbi's father. You see, a few times Bobbi has mentioned the fact that her father worked with Snoop Dogg, which is of course a great connection to start you off in the industry.
He did something for Snoop Dogg. Do you know him?
Yeah, I do.
Are you friends with him?
He's my uncle.
Really?
Yeah.
She surely was well connected from an earlier time in her life, which until revealed, we can only speculate what may have led her to that point. What people actually dislike about her being an industry plant though, is that she attempts to deny it for some reason.
So then I was like, I put a TikTok out and I was like, I'll give $300 to anyone who, the idea was I was hoping that like someone, I was like, if you tag someone and you get them to do it.
Bobbi claims that she made a TikTok saying she'll give $300 to somebody who gets her a celebrity guest. But once again, this is very classic industry plant activity. The industry will never just debut a new person with something crazy big. It would be too obvious and almost ineffective at that point. It has to look and feel authentic like a natural come-up story would, which WME actually almost pulled off for Bobbi if it wasn't for a few simple mistakes that I'll run you through right now. You see, this actually leads us absolutely perfectly into the third point of why there's so much hate for Bobbi Althoff, and this actually has to do with her kids. You see, Bobbi started started off on social media as a TikToker, showing what it's like to be a young mother of 2 children. But don't forget, this is where the true industry plant shone through, and we were all able to see through the sneaky ways that the industry works. She went very quickly from being strong on the standpoint of not talking about her kids too much, not showing their faces, or saying their names. But as soon as the industry decided it was her time, by the industry of course meaning WME and TJ Bernardy, it was now the decided time to plant her in the industry officially, and you could see her become more lenient with the boundaries she had previously placed. Why, you may be wondering, would she do this? Well, showing things that are known to be private draws attention, and when it comes to a career like this, attention is currency. If a celebrity came out with some breaking news, it would cover every headline within the hour. If there are little things the industry can get hype around, for example, not knowing the name or face of her kids, then the agency themselves can subtly drop hints and bits of information over time. This will give people something to gossip about, drawing more and more attention to the unfortunately now hated Bobbi Althoff. But it's almost time to get to the real error in the scheme that was going on behind the scenes. Everything was going smoothly, and there was just successes and wins to celebrate, but nothing could last forever for Bobbi.
The way we've gotten to know each other off camera, and I see what you're doing.
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
So
you want to seem cool. You're like, oh, I want my people to think. What do you call them?
goblins.
Did you come up with that?
Mm-hmm.
And they just went along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do you have a fan army name?
No.
Okay.
You would know that because you stalk me in your free time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to ask a question you know the answer to.
You see, after Bobbi's mega viral interview with Drake, clips were being posted. She clearly knew how to dominate the social media scene, or at least WME, who she signed with, did. But back on track, it was all good. She was winning, making thousands and thousands from YouTube AdSense alone. But one day, seemingly out of the blue, the Drake podcast would be taken off of YouTube. Fans were super confused. Why did this happen? What caused it? And most importantly, why did they both unfollow each other on Instagram? Being signed to the same label and having a super successful podcast episode, the usual follow-up step isn't to ghost each other and take down the episode. Everything is a bit hazy, but surely there would be a logical explanation for all that had happened. If we take a step back, we can trace this even further, because she just recently called out Lil Yachty too, another guest who had came onto her podcast. Cutting ties with Drake and taking a shot at Lil Yachty is definitely an interesting move for someone trying to become known and respected in the space. It's almost like she wanted to make enemies.
By boat, yeah.
Slow.
But I walked into his house and it
kinda
was
like
super awkward because like
those, though.
he's really kind of awkward, and I've heard that going into it. But me with another awkward person is like, I think it's because you guys are awkward. Maybe that's why. But if you guys are
not
awkward,
or are?
you guys aren't.
Oh,
Because
thank
he was awkward. I walked into his house. He didn't even like say hi to me. So then I was like, said, let's go to the bathroom. So then we go to the bathroom, and then we like get out, and then he's like, he's just sitting there with like his 2 assistants, and he's not even acknowledging that I'm like in the room, and my camera guy's like setting up. I'm just sitting there like
skin
on
crawling.
my phone, like I'm like trying, and then he comes up, he's like, oh hi, gives me like a half hug, and I'm just like, hi, then goes back to his spot, and I'm like, dude, I don't even want to do this. I'm texting my friend like, Ashley, I need to leave, this is so awkward, I don't want it, like what am I doing here? And then she's like, lean into this during the interview, like call it out. So then during our interview, I was able to be like, why did you do that? Like, why did you make me feel like that? Yeah, so it was actually really, it worked out.
After calling Yachty out, nobody heard much for Bobbi, and we're just left with time to speculate if something similar had gone down with Drake. The first claim made about why Bobbi and Drake cut ties is if he attempted to hit on her a bit too seriously off the camera. The interview with Drake was awkward, and he famously said, "I'd do it," in response to her asking if she was his type. So with that, people could only assume Drake may have taken it further off camera to an uncomfortable level. But this just seems unlikely for a couple of reasons. First off, Drake is dropping an album soon and wouldn't want to tarnish his reputation for a drop. Also, he has so many options. Why would he go for Bobbi Althoff? Well, he wouldn't, and fans quickly realized this, switching their angle of attack to just saying it was a huge PR stunt. But Bobbi actually came out on her Instagram story saying that she didn't want to do the Drake podcast in the first place, and now saying that there's so much negativity coming from it that she just wants to publicly say that nothing happened between her or Drake. Pretty crazy, and she showed some DMs with Dave Portnoy to back this up, but people were saying that it was all a PR stunt, because getting 2 people on the same agency to get one of the most viral podcasts of recent times and then delete it is crazy good for farming attention online. And like we mentioned earlier, attention is currency.
All of them, just every
Captivating.
every woman.
Present themselves in
Yeah.
a way that is intriguing and unique.
Bobbi, though, made the situation even more confusing, adding to the idea that this could be a planned PR stunt, because Bobbi actually showed up at Drake's LA show and made a super viral TikTok there. Pretty odd if they had actually cut ties. Why would she be at his show? You may think that's where it ends, with the fourth point of why people dislike her, just the fact that she had a falling out with Drake. But that isn't quite all there is to the story. You see, as we know, she's married, or potentially was married if the divorce rumors are actually true. So when she's going on a podcast and almost acting like she's single in the way she was talking with Drake, people started calling her out for cheating on her husband, Corey. Now, if you're Bobbi herself, or more likely the agency, when you see these accusations made to your newest industry plant, you need to do anything possible to fix the situation. And logical steps would be to cut her off from Drake temporarily, showing the world it isn't what they thought it may have been. While it may be foggy with the whole situation, there's one final clear reason as to why people are disliking Bobbi Althoff so strongly. And this one's actually pretty simple, in fact. The reason being that they find her boring, cringe, and generally unfunny. Now, this is probably a bigger factor in her hate than the fact that she was planted or cut off Drake. Nobody would really care if she had the most entertaining podcast in the world, but naturally, there's just people that aren't big fans. If you combine an acquired taste podcast with somebody who's a blatant plant and claims not to be, you set yourself up for failure, or at least failure in likability. This especially became a prevalent issue for her when people realized just how fake Bobbi's persona really was. There wasn't much substance or authenticity with her content. To a lot of people, it was just forced, cringe, awkward interviews. Bobbi, though, will no doubt go on to continue to have a successful career after the boost she got from the industry. But the real question is, will anybody actually be a fan of the Really Good podcast? Or will people just continue tuning in for the absolutely insane features she's pulling through industry planting?